I want to say, you know, it's such an emotional topic because I don't think people realize that for a lot of these people, this has been a life or death issue. This is something in which they have made risks and sacrifices that you won't even believe until you hear the stories, and even then it'll be something that surprises you. So let's get back to tonight. More important, I guess, than how difficult these stories are, it's how inspiring they are and how much hope we have here together as a community, as a group, how much hope we can feel for the future, because we know that even though things are difficult, they have been worse, they are getting better. And with events like this, with groups like the 13 organizations sponsoring this event, things will change, and they are changing as we speak because of tonight. So I'm going to get out of your face, and I want to introduce the rather spectacular Jordan T. Garcia, who is going to be taking over the program here. Jordan is the Colorado director of the American Friends Service Committee. He has been an active advocate for both queer liberation and immigration justice for over 15 years. And he has worked with us to bring this series to fruition. It wouldn't have been possible, really. Thank you, Jordan. Jordan is deeply moved, obviously, as I am, by the people he's met on his journey, and hopes to continue working towards a better world for all people, especially LGBTQ immigrants. Thank you one and all. Thank you everyone who's been a part of this. Tim, thank you. Jordan, it's in your hands now, and I hope you all have a beautiful, beautiful night.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jonathan. This is such a beautiful, it's so beautiful to see all your faces. And some of you are masked, and that's great too. Hello and welcome to the first of our part, Immigration is an LGBT Issue, Love Across Borders series. And as you heard, for the next three Tuesdays in September, we'll be sharing stories of LGBT immigrants and learning how to deepen our support for their leadership and resiliency. So again, my name is Jordan Garcia. I'm the program director at the American Friends Service Committee. I've been doing immigrant rights work for 15 years, and I tell you what, it never gets old. There's always something new to be learning and to be understanding. And I am constantly humbled by this work pretty much every day. So for those of you who have RSVP'd and are gathered here at Raíces, it's an incredible immigrant-owned brewery that is very COVID conscious and serves the best beer and pizza in town, sells me. Except for the week of September 15th, which is next week, and will be Zoom only. At 6:30 p.m. we'll start the program here with special guests. So if you aren't here in person today, you should be. You could be next time. And if you are in person today, don't come back next week, but come back the week after that. Each Tuesday, our program will be followed by incredible entertainment produced by the Black Actors Guild. Every part of the series will have English and Spanish interpretation on Zoom, provided by the incredible Community Language Cooperative, and will also be broadcast live to Facebook for folks watching from home.
Now it's no voice at all. He's there, but no voice at all.
But if you did register through the Althea page, there is a tote bag for you. Booming. There is a tote bag for you at the back tables, so don't forget to grab it. So this 4-week series highlights the critical needs of our LGBT immigrant siblings. Some are seeking asylum in the United States, not all. And it is brought to you by Mariposa at the Althea Center in partnership with New York-based Immigration Equality and the American Friends Service.
These are people from all parts. This is New York.
Not the whole list, but for tonight, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, Padres and Jóvenes Unidos, P5 Colorado, and the American Friends Service Committee. Did I say that? Yeah. Initially, this series was supposed to be an all-day symposium where we trapped you in a building and the beautiful Althea building, and really just talked like incessantly about the things that you need to know. But COVID changed all that. So this format is actually a really interesting and unique way to get some stories out there. We're hoping to be a little bit more cafecito style, a little bit more discussion and kind of hanging out together, and ask some deeper questions for ourselves as what can we do? For many LGBT immigrants, Self-determination has brought them to the US border. For others, it's not been self-determination. And from there, there is so much for us to do once people get to our US border. And there's a great need for even more folks to get involved. So today we have Dr. Nishant, I want to say her last name correctly, Abathier, and Alex Ortega. Dr. Abathier teaches at the, or Nishant, teaches in the Department of Ethnic Studies at CU Boulder, and they are passionate that their students of color, especially women, queer, and trans students of color, need to feel like they belong at universities. Can we just have a snaps for that, please? Thank you. Quote, whatever we have to say, think, or write is important for others to learn and to hear, they said in a previously published article. Quote, it is important for us, it is important for the communities we come from, it is important for the people who are in the majority or are more privileged to hear what our stories are. We should not feel dejected by being here. Nishant encourages students to continue to do the work you want to do and to bring the change. And Nishant is joined by Alex, originally from Gomez Palacio, Durango, Mexico. Alex migrated to the United States at the age of 16 and has lived in Colorado for the last 6 years. Alex's passion for organizing began with fighting for language justice as an ESL student at the Skyline High School in Longmont, Colorado. And his passion for helping his community led him to work with Northern Colorado Dreamers United, United We Dream, and most recently, he joined the team at Padres and Jóvenes Unidos. He is currently the lead organizer, where he supports finding new and up-to-date methods to organize and engage parents and youth. As an undocumented queer immigrant, Alex is committed to fighting against systems of oppression that keep communities of color, both parents and youth, from succeeding in the state of Colorado and around the country. So let's give them both a warm welcome. Thank you. And we're gonna go ahead and start out with kind of an easy question just to kind of get us going here. I'd love it if each of you could share just a little bit about your story and how you got here tonight, and something that you feel brought you here tonight.
Hello? Yeah, this is okay. Okay. Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Nishant. Thank you for being here. Thank you for braving the snow, and thank you for braving COVID to be here. Those of you who are here in person right now, and it's good to see faces. I feel like I haven't seen so many faces together in a while, so it's good to be in a space like this. Thank you, Jordan, for inviting me here. Thank you for all the collaborators and the partners involved in putting this event together. So I'm here because Jordan invited me. So that's my direct answer. But my story of immigration, or as a migrant who's queer and non-binary, is that of I'm not seeking asylum. I'm here on H-1B, so I'm here as a skilled worker in this country. I'm here as a professional in this country. I've been in this country for 4 years, and so it's a different story, and it's a story that tells us how migration works and how arbitrary these processes are, and how some of us who are often come from different from the privileges, have a different way of navigating this country, right? So I am Canadian on paper. I am Indian, but I have a Canadian citizenship. So I came here as a skilled worker who has done a PhD, who's now teaching, right? So I think it's very different from folks who are here undocumented, folks who are here not on visas like H-1B, which is catered towards getting skilled, quote unquote, right? So when I say skilled or educated, I'm using quotations because it's not really, I'm not really skilled. These are arbitrary structures that are created to say some folks are skilled and some folks are unskilled, or some folks are educated and some folks are not, some folks are documented or not undocumented, right? So these are binaries that are created through these systems of immigration in this country, which has always been about white supremacy and colonialism, right? So that this country has needed people to come to work, people of color to come forcefully through systems of slavery, or sometimes through voluntary workers like myself, or folks who are coming as undocumented, or coming as refugees, or coming as asylum seekers from different parts of the world for different reasons, right? But this country has needed all our labors. And that's why we come here. But it needs the labor, but it doesn't really need our bodies, right? And that's why we are precarious across these hierarchies of who's documented and who's not documented. But even documented folks, there is a slight different sense of precarity that I feel, which is very different from folks who are undocumented, or folks who are on DACA, or folks who are born here and don't have status. And so I can tell a more privileged story of my immigration experiences is because how these structures and categories are created by the state, right? Even though I teach ethnic studies, which if Trump knows, he would not let me into this country, right? And so it allows, I can teach about colonialism and white supremacy and patriarchy and transphobia and homophobia and capitalism and whatnot in my classes. And I feel very privileged and honored to do that work, which hopefully my intentions is that that work is unsettling the state itself, right? So even though I'm here on visa, that visa, which is very different from folks who are on other visas, but and it's seemed to be for skilled workers who are mostly Chinese and Indians, engineers and IT workers who get this visa, right? Education workers also get that kind of visa, but in far less numbers as compared to folks who are in IT and engineering and finance. But even with that, the privileges of the visa that come right now, what Trump passed a few months ago, it's been a few months. This summer has been long for everyone, right? So it's been a few months now so I've been told that even though I have this visa, which allows me status in this country and allows me to have a job, that if I leave the country, I might not be guaranteed to come back in, right? So my employer has told me that I should not leave till December because the new policies that Trump government has put in for H-1B workers, right? And so we are migrants and immigrants, so we are workers, right? Like that's all the relationship I have with this country, that I'm here to work, even though hopefully my work does work against the state, but I'm here to do that work, right? And so in that long history of privileges, it's also about how Asians come into this country. Asians come here as often model minorities, Asians who are Indians, Chinese, Japanese, Korean especially have come here since the 1960s as privileged migrant workers who are skilled and educated, which the state wants, right? And we have come here in these privileges to structurally be anti-Black, anti-Latinx, and anti-Indigenous, right? Because we are seen as these model minority folks of color who have the skills and who can work and have some kind of upward mobility and education. So we are not how Black folks are doing, or Indigenous folks are doing, or Latinx folks are doing, right? Even Asian it's a very broad term. There are folks who've come here from Southeast Asia, fleeing all kinds of wars, imperial wars that US has been fighting there. So people have come here as refugees from there. People who come from Muslim parts of of Asia as Muslims who are fleeing away wars that US is directly fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other parts of Middle East and Pakistan. Right. So there's many different forms of Asian migrants, but there's a specific community between Indians and Chinese and Japanese and Koreans who come here as model minority to be told and to Black folks and Indigenous folks and Latinx folks look at them and do what we are doing, right? And so structurally we are here to be in the ladder of white supremacy closer to white folks, and to then the state uses our model minority status, quote unquote, to then perpetrate its anti-Black, anti-Native, anti-Latinx policies. And so it tells us these different stories of why is it that we see Chinese and Indians and Japanese folks often who are doing much better professionally, economically, and how they can live in they can live the white suburban dreams because of access to education and jobs that they have or we have, right? So it complicates all these narratives of why do we see some Asians, not all Asians, but some Asians who are doing much better than others, much better again in quotes, right? But also one thing that I've come to realize in the last 4 years is that I'm here because of all the struggles that Black folks have been fighting for Black liberation and the civil rights movement. That I, as an Asian, could have been allowed to come into this country post 1960s is through the civil rights movement, is through the civil rights movement that allowed immigration for folks of color from the global South, right? And also that as the Supreme Court judgment said a few months, that queer and trans folks, rights for queer and trans folks are also enshrined through the civil rights movement. So Black liberation in this moment, post George Floyd in 2020, not just in this moment, but for ever since this country has been founded, Black liberation has allowed for folks of color, for queer and trans folks, to also be part of those imaginations of what liberation and justice looks like, right? And so I just wanted to throw those things out in terms of, so I'm not asylum seeker from India, right? I'm much more privileged in terms of my H-1B status in this country, which is precarious as it is. Still, I do have access to a job and documents where I can work in a public institution still, right? And so maybe I'll stop there. Yeah.
Yes. Like, yes. Thank you so much. I love these. I love this.
Oh, I get to talk. Okay. Good night, everyone. My name is Alex Ortega. I was born and raised in Gomez Palacio, Durango, Mexico. I am undocumented. I'm actually the living example that DACA is not the solution that the immigrant community needs. I actually did not qualify for DACA. I got left out of it. So I've been living undocumented for the last 6 years. But like I mentioned, I was born and raised in Gomez Palacio, Durango, Mexico. I lived there for 16 years. And when I decided to migrate to the United States, it was just like any other people looking for better opportunities, something that, I saw it as an opportunity to learn a new language because my intention was to actually study international business. But at the same time, and not talking to people about it, was that I was running away from the narcotráfico, right? All the things that were happening in Mexico, and at my age being 16, all the people, all the like young guys my age were being kidnapped, and like take them to join them, and that's not something that I wanted for me. I didn't want to be that next young kid that was going to be kidnapped, and also at the same time struggling within the school system in Mexico with machismo and trying to finally come out as gay and, finally accept myself as I am. So I decided to come to the United States. And, when I first came in here 6 years ago, I was, I didn't know any single word in English. I knew no, and just because it means the same in English and Spanish. But then I went to high school. I did my junior year and my senior year. I came in as an ELCL student. And somehow I still managed to get on top of my classes, graduate with a 3.9 GPA, and came in the rank 20th out of 200 students when I had only been there for 2 years. But not everything was pink color, right? So in high school, that's when I first found out, just like a lot of young undocumented people trying to apply for college and trying to apply for FAFSA, that you are undocumented, right? Because I asked for that social security number to have that privilege to access that money to go to college. So that's when I first found out, or that I better understood what being undocumented meant. And that's when a lot of people came into my life. Actually, one of them, it's on the live. I don't know if you all saw him, but it's Bob Norris. He was there. He was one of the first people who came up to me. He was one of the first people who believed in me and gave me a scholarship to go to college. And he talk to me about Northern Colorado Dreamers United. I first came in with them as a volunteer, just, you know, learning about the immigration system, really understanding a lot of the things that I was going through, but that I didn't understand at the time because I was not well educated when it came to immigration. And then after that, I had that opportunity to work with United We Dream at the national level. I joined them in the 2016 Here to Stay campaign. That was the first time that people were hearing the hashtag Here to Stay. It was like the trendy thing during 2016 elections. And that's when I started joining these places that were, you know, intersectional and intergenerational. One, because I was getting to know more queer people who were also immigrants and who were undocumented, and at the same time fighting for human rights and making sure the immigrant communities were being protected. After that, I got to come back to Northern Colorado Dreamers United, where I had already been educated on immigration. I was experiencing firsthand what it was going to college and being surrounded by mostly white students and being one of the 3/4 brown students in the classroom. And another thing, struggling with money, being able to pay for college. And when I came back to Northern Colorado Dreamers United, I started working and the Bob Norris Youth with Experience Scholarship, actually opening that scholarship for students in Boulder County to apply and being in charge of raising between like 12 to 15,000 to give out in scholarships to undocumented students to make sure they could keep going and pursuing a higher education. After doing all of this, that was the moment that I actually sat down with myself, like just myself on the couch, and I say, there is something happening with the education system. I don't feel like I belong. And it's not right for me to feel like that, right? One was being immigrant. Back then, even though it was already 2016, 2017, still being queer, still being gay, lesbian, bisexual, anything within the spectrum was still not well seen within the community. We have come way far from 2016 and where we are right now. But back then I felt like I just didn't belong. I just didn't fit within the space that I was placed. So that's when I took the hard decision for me and a hard decision for, a hard decision for any undocumented immigrant or an immigrant in the United States, which is dropping from higher education and actually focusing on fixing a lot of things within the community. So I dropped out of college. I got to join Padres and Jóvenes Unidos 2.5 years ago as a community organizer and really learning about the scooter prison pipeline. And this really made me look back when I was in high school as an ELCL student and how a lot of my peers who were also undocumented, who were immigrant, who were learning English, were not making it through the classes and were falling through the education system. And I knew that there was something going on, but I didn't understand it. When I finally came into Padres, I got to understand the scooter prison pipeline, right? And how this actually exists and how it actually affects brown and black students or any students of color. And not just that, but then there's not only a scooter prison pipeline, but it's also a scooter deportation pipeline. The people like myself who were attending high school and were seeing a police officer as the first thing to see in the front of the school was a threat for us. The parents who are undocumented dropping off their students in school and having those police officers there were a threat for them. So I got to learn about all of this while working with Padres, and I'm still there and I'm still happy to be learning about it. But that's a lot of what actually brings me here. Understanding where I came from, actually living firsthand experiences of being undocumented in high school, not knowing my rights, thinking that a police officer can actually deport me, going through this whole fight of, having to win driver licenses for undocumented community, going through the whole fight of ending collaboration between ICE and police in Colorado, and now going through a whole fight of actually making people understand that DACA is not the solution for the immigrant community, that there is something that we need to fight that could actually protect more people. And, along the way with all of this, it's fighting with constantly attacks from the current president with either the immigrant community, the LGBTQ community, the Black community, right? Anyone who is a minority right now in the country, it's under attack. So at the same time that I'm doing all of that, I'm also trying to join our brothers and sisters in the fight from any other communities.
Thank you so much. Woo. Can we just give it up for these folks? Okay, so my next question is a little bit harder, but what excites you about intersectional organizing?
That is a hard question. I think I'm trying to think where do I start from, or how do I answer that? I think for me, so I'm someone who teaches about intersectionality in the classrooms, and I think one of the reasons I teach about it as a one of the most powerful concepts that I've come across as a teacher, as a writer, as a scholar myself, is intersectionality, because of how it allows us to come, it allows different people to come together through our differences, right? To recognizing differences, not to denying the differences, but actually to recognize that we all come from different histories, different identities, different positions, and that we still all can have a stake in collective liberation, these are not just, it's for me, it's just not a theoretical concept or an academic concept, it's lived reality, because we all live through different intersections of our own identities, right? And some identities, depending on who we are, can give us privilege, and others can give us, we can face more oppression through those identities, and to recognizing those differences is very important. So often, I think what happens in organizing spaces is that the impulse is to deny the differences, right? And so those are the critiques of what we've hear say from white LGBTQ organizing that happens, white gay organizing, white feminist organizing, or at this time, I don't want to talk about the elections, or I don't want to talk about any of that, the political things that are happening right now, but that we can be at a point where so many different oppressed communities are fighting for rights at this point, and that our hopes can be given to someone who's an old white man, right, whose policies don't stand up to anything, whose analysis doesn't stand up to any of that intersectional analysis. And I think it's the lack of that intersectional analysis and organizing and of people coming together that mainstream political institutions can still think that he can be the solution. And now that any critiques of Biden, then mostly what I've been experiencing is that any critiques of Biden then from white folks then becomes that, oh, so you support Trump, right? And that binary that's created between Democrat or Republican without thinking about indigenous people's stolen lands, without thinking about histories of slavery and what's happening now, or colonization of how US has taken over Mexico or Hawaii or Alaska or Puerto Rico, that Republicans and Democrats have equally been complicit in all those violences. And the solution then is not going to be through maintaining the structure, but rather thinking through more intersectionally to think about who are the communities who are fighting for their lives. For liberation is not just for liberation of all, but actually everyday fighting for lives. And that often we see folks, queer and trans folks of color, who are at the forefront of these struggles, is because of the multiple intersections that queer and trans folks of color have. That it's not that just they're oppressed through them being queer, or them being trans, or them being a person of color, or them being a woman, or a person with disabilities, or working class, or undocumented, or migrant, but that actually queer and trans folks of color embody so many of those identities, and that's why often we and they are at the front of these struggles, and that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me hope to come to spaces like these, to think about how we can be connected through our different histories of our own migration patterns, but also to thinking about the state being a colonial white supremacist state that, and along with that patriarchal, homophobic, transphobic, and capitalist, right? And so that so many of us are oppressed through those intersections, but often we only see one intersection through which we are oppressed and not connect with others. But connecting with others is what threatens the state. And that's why we are seeing all kinds of violence from the state towards activists right now, right? People who are organizing, be it black folks, Latinx folks, or indigenous folks, or Antifa folks, who are often, a lot of times they're white folks. And why are they? Because they're recognizing the need to come out in solidarity with folks of color, and the state is threatened by that, right? And those are all because of the work that our elders have done for generations and centuries to thinking about these interconnected struggles, intersectional struggles, which are that we all need to be in it together. Yeah.
Love it when you say that stuff. Alex, do you want to share?
For me, sorry, this is one of those days that I'm like thinking in Spanish and speaking in English, so it's hard for me to translate everything right now. But I think for me, when it comes to intersectional spaces, like what I love the most is the beauty of never finished learning. It's a lot of communities coming together to fight for one thing. And, you know, like I feel like over the last 4 years, it's become more clear that freedom for one community doesn't mean anything if other communities are still oppressed. And just really seeing from the LGBTQ community, from the immigrant community, the Black community, the Asian community, like coming all together to fight for one thing that is just human rights, it's beautiful. And that's something that I've seen emerge over the last 4 years that I've been part of in spaces. I come from this background of organizing where I've seen youth and parents actually coming together and sharing their stories and actually helping them understand that they are unique in their own ways, right? Like all these things that all these communities that they belong to make them really unique. And that's what makes them experts in the topic and make them experts to share their stories and be in spaces like this. But yeah, I think that that's part of where I come from when it comes to intersectional spaces. Just the beauty of never actually finished to learn. I have not finished learning about the LGBTQ community, which I belong to. I have not finished learning from the immigrant community. I have not finished learning from being Mexicano, right? Like what it actually means. And I know that I'm never gonna finish learning all, because I know that, you know, I'm learning from my ancestors, I'm learning from my parents, but I know that at the same time, I'm gonna be learning from future generations, because they're gonna go, when they're gonna keep going through different stuff that I did not get to experience, and I'm gonna keep learning from them. And last, the food, because when you're in intersectional spaces, oh my God, the food.
Amazing, I love it. Thank you both so much for sharing those pieces. Just speaking for myself, I feel like intersectional organizing is like a constantly moving creature that I'm learning so much about it on every step, and it's challenging and exciting and never a dull moment. So I'm really happy to hear that. I'd like to hear a little bit about some work that you are doing that you're excited about, whether it's work that you're doing or work that you're seeing other people do. We want to try and ignite a little bit of creativity in people who are watching. Like, what are some things that we could be doing or getting engaged with that we're excited about?
Sure, I'll go first. So like I mentioned, I'm currently working as a lead organizer at Padres and Jóvenes Unidos. So I don't know if you all saw the awesome news over the summer, but you know, like Padres was the main organization pushing for getting SROs or cops out of Denver public schools. And that's something that we got to do, you know, like at the beginning of the summer, after such a tragic moment of like as the killing of George Floyd, out of many happening over the summer. We got to make that happen. We got to get SROs out of school, and now we're getting ready to jump into this implementation phase to make sure that those that money that it's getting taken away from cops from being in Denver public schools, it's actually invested in resources the students actually need in schools, as mental health support, more counselors, more college advisors, making sure that they actually make it to college, right? It's not, sometimes it's great to have teachers in school, in higher education, they actually understand all of these topics and that are actually educating students the way they're educating students the way that it should be. But sometimes our students, our own students, our students of color, are not making it to that finish line. So really doing this work and making sure that our students are graduating, our students are receiving those resources, it's something that I'm really excited about. And not just that, but like Jordan was mentioning, right? Like seeing this whole thing of intersectional organizing emerging, and really seeing a lot of organizations acknowledging, right, the again, if we are fighting for immigrant rights, then we're also fighting for freedom of the Black community. We're also fighting for the freedom of transgender and non-binary and everyone in the LGBTQ community. So just really seeing the space that I work within, which is the schools, and working with parents, working with youth, and really seeing how much educated they are even before they join the space already. Just seeing how people are actually taking initiative to educate themselves in their own time, and actually looking for opportunities or organizations to join. That's something that I'm really excited about. I don't know what results for elections are going to look like, but what I do know, it's that our community, it's getting ready. Our community is actually feeling that urge of fighting and fighting for their rights. So that's something that I just look forward to for this year and for the upcoming years. Because if this is the change that we're being able to make right now, when people are still educating themselves or people are still joining organizations, I cannot imagine what we can actually accomplish in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, when people are actually more educated, where people are actually more ready to fight. And yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo the hope and the optimism that Alex has shared. I think no matter what the elections do, we are already at a point in this in the last few months since the pandemic began that all the collective violences that we have witnessed, but we've also witnessed a lot of collective victories, very significant victories in the last few months. And often we forget about those victories because of what happens in Washington, or what is happening with the pandemic, or what's happening with police brutality or at the borders. But also that so many things have happened that now words like intersectionality can be mainstream, that words like abolition can be mainstream, words like BIPOC can be mainstream, that New York Times can write an article saying what BIPOC is, that people can then come out and support trans women of color, and specifically Black trans women, that these are victories which have taken decades and centuries in some instances, but that we've finally come to a point where I think people have more collective knowledges and more critical vocabulary, which is also then changing things, right? Like when the pandemic began, that to recognize essential workers, to recognize as messed up as hierarchies are of labor, that grocery workers could still be recognized as workers that all of us need collectively, right? That we can recognize that that student loans and mortgages and rents can be frozen, even though eviction is an ongoing struggle, even though we don't know what will happen with the new CDC ruling or not ruling. What are the CDC pass? Not rules, right? Yeah, and so we don't know what will happen in January once that ends, but that there's collective conversations that housing should be free, food should be free, public transportation should be free, that we saw in the first few months when the pandemic started, and that cops should be held accountable, right? And that more and more conversations are happening around abolition of the police industrial complex, along with the prison industrial complex, but also that we can't just have these people with guns and not hold them accountable, right? Which is connected to what happens in the prisons, which is connected to what happens in the schools, which is connected to what happens in detention centers. And so that now it's not just like within fringes of left progressive communities that we belong to, we are having these conversations, but actually they're happening at the mainstream level, right? And that the Democratic Party can take it somewhere else, but that actually in not this year, but in 4 years, we might have a much more critical mass to think about these things along with the energies around climate crisis that we are witnessing, and that it's the younger, much younger folks than me who are at the forefront of these things, right? Like to see Gen Z already having much deeper analysis and understanding of what these structural violences are than any of my peers or my elders do, right? Which is really, really amazing to see, to center climate crisis in these struggles, but with also thinking about capitalism. These been, since school has started in the last few weeks, there's been all these memes going around about how Gen Z talks about capitalism, and the way they talk about capitalism is far, far more radical than anyone I witnessed growing up or I witnessed in my peer circles, right? And that is brilliant, right? Like that gives a lot of hope that not this year, but in the next few years, we will have a critical mass of people who are willing to fight for these things in ways which are deeply, deeply intersectional, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, last question is a little bit of a softball, but what is, we talk about kind of the macro, and I'd like to go to the micro, like on a personal level, what is keeping you like going right now? Like what's keeping you going right now? Is it, what are you listening to? What are you eating? What are you wearing? Like what is keeping you going?
It's the wrong day to ask that question. With all that snow, I was trying to be like, do I get out of the house today? Should I be getting out of the house? Wearing colors was a way to get out of the house. I was not gonna wear all these colors, but then like, this is the only way I'm gonna get out in the first snow of the fall. Of the fall. Yeah, snow has been on my mind for the last 4 or 5 days. So I don't really, wearing colors was the only way to get out of it. What am I? Well, I just started watching this really rad feminist Pakistani show that came out a few weeks ago in Pakistan, which is about these bunch of women coming together across their class differences, fighting men who are men. And I have binge watched like 5 episodes in the last 30 hours, maybe 1 hour each. And these are women who are just out there to get men who have harmed them. And women coming, recognizing regional and class differences and caste differences, and forming an intersectional community of fighters in some ways who are, it's a very, very mainstream show, but the way they are talking about patriarchy and sexual violence and rape culture and everything that's embedded in not just Pakistani society, but I think across the globe in terms of how patriarchy works, it's been really inspiring. It's been like, mainstream shows can do some, very rarely excite me that much. And so with the snow, that's where I've been excited with seeing these women fight the men. You know? It's called Churels, which means, how do I translate that? Churels means basically witches. And so that women, and churel is a very, can often be used in a very misogynist, patriarchal way of saying these women who are not of good values and good morals. And they're going against the norms of heteropatriarchy and gender binary. And the show actually, so I'm on episode 5 and I've already seen one trans woman and so many queer folks And it's like, okay, what is happening? How are these people? And we are not actually like, queerness and gender are not questions. They're just human beings who are fighting men. And that cis het women can be in alliance with queer women and trans women without negotiating is such a dream world, right? Like it's such a, like with all the turf violence that happens all the time, and homophobic violences that happens in feminist spaces, it was just like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah.
Oh my God. This is funny because I got asked this question 2 years ago too, and I didn't know how to answer it. But this time, I think for me, it looks a little bit different because what I do for work and what I do most of my day is do a lot of this political stuff. When I actually, like something that keeps me going, one, it's that it's almost fall season, even though summer kind of just packed their stuff yesterday and it was like deuces. And then it started snowing today and it was like, okay, where's my fall? But it's fall season, almost here. It's also almost spooky season, which is one of my favorites, even though I'm a chicken and I will not go to any haunted houses or not watch any scary movies, but it's still my favorite because you can smell it in the air. And that's two things that keep me going. The other thing that keeps me going is watching a lot of drag queens. I have a thing for drag queens and I have a thing for them and I have a lot of respect. So that's another thing that keeps me going, just watching anything on YouTube that is drag queens. This is promotion, they're not paying me, but there is a season of La Más Draga, which is the Mexican version of RuPaul, coming out on September 22nd on YouTube. You can watch it. There's already 2 seasons. It's really good. So anything like that, anything that it's queer, or how we say it in Spanish, like anything that it's like bien joto, I just love watching it. It just gives me so much life. It gets me joy because it's something that I oppressed for so many years. Even though I came out at the age of 15, I didn't fully come out as queer until I was maybe 18, and not really embracing it until like 2 years ago. So it's like now that I actually get to watch it, now that I actually get to speak it without like being ashamed about it, like it just gives me so much joy. And other than that, food. I'm a person who likes to eat a lot, like a lot. And the pandemic has not been the greatest help for that. Neither for my pocket, because my grocery budget just went up. But you know, cookies and milk and chips, lots of chips with salsa. That's my favorite. So that's what kind of keeps me going right now. And one last thing, I use the pandemic for connecting with a lot of my friends from Mexico that I lost connections with. So over the last few months, I have gotten to FaceTime or be on calls with a lot of people who helped me through rough times of living in Mexico and who, you know, like have still keep supporting me throughout these 6 years. So just connecting with them, that has like actually kept me going, like knowing what's going on with their lives and not knowing like where they actually ended. And now like knowing what they're doing, how their family is doing, that's what keeps me going through like these times.
Oh, yes, let's just hear it. Thank you. Oh, thank you both so much. I think what we heard tonight was really moving for many of us, at least was for me. There's so much nuance to learn. There's like so much nuance that I feel like I still want to pick up on. And I want folks to know that even though we're doing a lot of this learning, there's a lot that you can be doing anyway. So for the struggle for justice or for the struggle for LGBT immigrant siblings, in order for that to be successful, we need all of you, each and every one of you. One of the things I like to say is, in these moments, we have to figure out where our sphere of influence is and what we can be doing within that sphere of influence, right? And then also figure out what we're good at and gift gift those gifts to the movement. So I really want to be thinking about that. We need volunteers, we need financial support, we need a dedicated community of support working with our familia and demanding justice. All we want for you is to pick an organization or a group or a cause and just jump in. So I want to tell you really quickly about a couple of organizations and what they're doing. You heard a lot about the work that Padres and Jóvenes Unidos is doing right now. Please reach out to Alex if you want to get involved with that work, working with young people, working with parents. Awesome. PFLAG Denver is another group that is here. Thank you for repping PFLAG. PFLAG Denver is doing incredible work and they would love for you to join them. They're doing some great work with trans folks right now and parents of young trans people. The Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition has a couple of things that they're working on right now. One is a statewide legal defense fund. Another is kind of trying to protect privacy of immigrant people who have licenses that undocumented folks can get. We want to protect that information so that people who have those licenses, their information doesn't get shared with ICE. And I want to share a little bit about some of the work that American Friends Service Committee is doing. We're partnered with a bunch of organizations, but we're working with the transgender folks who are in our Immigrant Detention Center here in Aurora, Colorado. There's 2 places in the whole country where they send transgender immigrants to be detained, and one of them is here in Aurora, Colorado. And so what we do is we put money on their books and their commissary so they can call their family and friends. And then folks like Nishant have volunteered to pick people up when they get released and provide them with cell phones and makeup and what they need to do to get by. And that's really important work. And it is literally, I'm like texting Nishant, can you pick someone up in an hour and a half? So like, you know, we need people like you who can like say, yep, I can do that to get that work done. So if you enjoyed tonight's program, we urge you to tell a friend and to join us next week. Our deepest gratitude to Raices for sharing their beautiful space with us, to Optimum Films for providing professional audiovisual services, to the Alternative for donating some t-shirts for us, and to the Black Actors Guild for producing our entertainment segments each week. And with that, I'd like to introduce and turn everything over to our entertainment MC from the Black Actors Guild, Franklin Cruz. I think they can hear you on too.
Beautiful. Hello, everyone at Zoom. I was about to do this off stage with no microphone. Wouldn't have been fair to you. Hi, everyone. My name is Franklin Cruz. Doesn't matter because I'm going to be gone in 10 seconds. Let me introduce the people who do matter. So opening up tonight, we have a wonderful, wonderful poet from the Denver community. Bryce Meurio is a poet, activist, and storyteller from Denver who authored 2 collections of poetry, recorded an EP along musician Chadzilla Johnson, and currently serves as the editor-in-chief of the South Broadway Press. Bryce has hosted over 100 events along the Front Range, and in 2019, Westward Magazine recognized him as a Colorado creative for his contribution to the arts community in Denver. He believes that artists should focus more on self-discovery and less on self-destruction. So please make a lot of noise and bring up Bryce Meurio.
Hi, thank you, Franklin, for the nice introduction, and thank you for the wonderful words and sharing. It's good to be here and be a part of this event, this recurring event that I think is having a lot of really important conversations and making it happen in a time where it's really difficult to gather people and to do exactly what's being done here. My name is Bryce. I'm a poet, and I gathered some poems to share with you folks tonight. I've been thinking a lot about some of the things that Nishant spoke to on stage about binary thinking, either or thinking as a tenet of white supremacy and our culture. some of that came through in this poem that I'm going to share with you folks. When I was doing visitations at the ICE detention center through Casa de Paz, and visiting a gentleman there, and thinking how, I think before I had a mentality that like America was defined by these systems of oppression and the state and all these things. And I feel like in my time of visiting with this man at the ICE detention center, I realized that really what I think makes up America, if that's even, you know, is the pushback and the fight for liberation. And I want that personally to be what defines America, and that influenced this poem I'm going to read, called America. Through the mirror of my window, America sees me, and America sees America, and I see America, and I see me. America is hiding beneath the floorboards, afraid of the heavy bootstraps of America. America is building its weapons from the hollow bones of the voiceless. America is placing headphones onto the soft-shelled skulls of its babies and asking for call and response like colorblind blues song. America is a prison inside of a prison. America is a midnight train with no break. It was built that way. There is no evolution of the endless rotation of its industrial wheels into a digital world. It moves faster by not touching the earth. It paves over everything like an angry painter that wants to wash away any feeling for what it once was, but continues to be. America is at war with the stars that just want to burn for it, and America thinks that by burning itself, it can become those stars. America is too afraid of being gay to kiss his wife the way she wants. America is dropping babies and kissing bombs. America has filled its Bible with cotton cash and a rifle made from the shrapnel of planes and buildings. America falls 1,300 feet in the autumn, cultivating fear in the damp soil of its own destruction. America sees its own shadow. America, the selective dementia of trauma, flags wrapped around the heavy coffins of its trespasses, drills out spiritual bypasses through the sides of mountains. The wind whistles Dixie songs through the tunnels. America prays to God on picket signs at God's funeral. America has fenced itself into its own media. Death has become America, destroyer of worlds. America has resigned itself to solitary confinement, lost itself to the echoes of its own voice, laughs madly at the star-spangled banner wrapped around its eyes, holding feathers and tar in its broken hands like justice scales. America wants to be everyone, but no one can be America. America talks loudly, but does not speak. America has been given the key to heaven and wears it around its neck like a noose. Bear with me on these page turns. Need more hands. America is praying that America can find sanctuary from America in America. America visits America for 1 hour under stern observation with nothing in its pockets, through tiny glass windows, talking to America on a corded phone. The hands press up to both sides of the glass, but they do not touch. They have nothing left to talk about. America's mouth runs over with milk and honey as America dies of thirst. America is the breath that was taken from the 8 lungs of 4 little black girls in a church in Alabama and found its way into the saxophone of John Coltrane. America did not stop there. Thank you. That poem was largely influenced by John Coltrane, and specifically his song Alabama, which he wrote in response to 4 little girls, the bombing in 1963, I believe, of a church where 4 little black girls were killed. And he took a speech of Martin Luther King's and, using the same intonation as the speech, created this really beautiful song that influenced that poem a lot. I think this poem is largely about feeling like there's nowhere to turn for a symbol of good in the world. It's called What Mouth? What mouth can we eat from now? As every tooth seems to sharpen on ignorant rocks, as each lip becomes inflated purple on the gnawing idea of being great, or else, or else. What mouth is this that speaks in blood but does not understand a bloodline? What thin music can be heard through the bubbling blabber of hot red America, a sword in its swollen cheek, a smile like an open wound? What ornamental breath that catches into the amnesiac wind to die? A humming remains in the sacred dirt of a promise denied. A humming from a mouth which does not swallow, but always feeds. A humming like electricity that cannot be bottled. Come now and hum into the past that waits around on bare feet. For concrete roads to turn again to dirt paths. See that you are in the mouth, inside of a mouth, inside of a mouth. Generations have had to build temporary temples on acidic tongues. Hear them hum within you, without you, patient always as an open mouth. Thank you. This poem is called An Anthem for When You're Staring Down the Barrel of a Gun. You aim to shoot us down, do you? Well, let me tell you this. These walls may be wooden, but it takes more than hot breath to catch them on fire. They were hammered up in heartbeats to the tempo of our footsteps down highways that took us a lineage of lifetimes to walk down. So don't come in here claiming you've met God when you and I both know they're busy pulling down your sanctions, readjusting the volume in the chamber of your weapon. While you were on the balcony, we were in the dirt, digging our fingernails in for stability, unknowingly creating moonlight stories tucked into these nail beds. We don't write family with our hands. We write it with our sore arms. We sing it with our sick throat, our blackened lungs. We burn it into the fields that surround the nameless land. And our fire don't smoke. It leaves trees in the wake of its ashes. Here we do not pretend we've been gifted the key to the sky. The river always runs, and most of us never get the chance to walk around with dry feet, seeing as we're always returning to our mother for advice, never stepping into the same river twice. On the shoulder of mourning, we disarm our wristwatches, seeing them as a symbol of a man who has lost his son. We know that a crucifix casts a 5 o'clock shadow, that flower beds die inside of a prison. We recognize the ringing of a shovel hitting the earth as a pain song. We do not read anything counting up from years that celebrate a crucifixion. You must expect violence from the clock when we are punching it twice a day, every day of the week. The war on time is not endless. You aim to shoot us down, do you? Does your crosshair account for our wind? The wind we've always listened to, the same one you ignore. You choke to death and we starve at different ends of the same table. So show me where you are written and why it must be locked in gold, hidden from the sky that you has claimed to have birthed it. And tell me where your hunger has gotten you, but craving that which has always been waiting for you. If you can just put your gun down. Thank you. Thank you. This is my last one, in my most recent poem. I've been thinking a lot about the upcoming election and and the feeling of just not feeling good about either candidate and how terrible it is, and that this is where we're at. In what does finding hope look like in the face of just two terrible candidates and so much work to be done. So this poem is called Inauguration, and it's about an inauguration of self. We gather for the election of oneself, president of your own two hands, president of tending to the garden, president of continuing resistance, president of understanding that no president is your savior, president of pulling the wigs off the heads of the past, president of heaven, president of disruptions and feminisms, president of the demilitarization of language, president of the weaponizing of truth to power, of language as love, speechmaker of the speeches delivered at the podium of your skull, president of sleep, of lucid dream, of the flaming sacred heart, president of the unfamiliar, president of border towns, of lowering the bridge in the middle of the moonless night, president of mirrors, of meditating in traffic, president of the cauterization that follows the bloodletting, president of criticizing the president, president and resident, president of sweet music, president of being naked with the windows open, president of the gray space, always running and never arriving, always saying goodbye as if hello, president of the blank space, desperate to be painted into prismatic gender, president of intentions, impacts, and long-term thinking, president of a golden lineage of 7 generations and secretary of 7 generations yet to come, president of multitude, a cabinet full to the brim with nutrients, president of taking your dog out to pasture and letting it run free into the wilderness, resigned president of wilderness, listener to the presidency of trees, president of the night, blind and visionary, emperor president of the best burritos, president of the feral raccoons sweeping through the dumpsters of golden national trash, president of being tiny in their tiny president music box, sleeping like a good thought too soon, president of nothing, perfect, awful nothing, patiently awaiting more nothing, and in the eastern heart of somewhere else, someone waiting for something. President of unwritten songs and tomorrows that live in empty boxes, while the copper heads of dead men drown in the bottom of wishing wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. So this next person that I'm bringing up is actually very, very familiar with this space because they're literally one of the Mocochetes, one of the best bands in Denver. He is definitely one of the best musicians. I'm doing all of this and not reading his bio because I love him so much that I literally could just sit up here and tell you all the different ways that I love him, but that'd be a whole poem, and that's not what you're here for, right? But it's gonna be a really beautiful night to end us off at, and I'm actually gonna hang out up here because we have a little surprise for you guys later. So this is Elias Garcia. Everyone make some noise for Elias. Lately, my mother and I have been working with my niece in the garden. We look at the way she messes with the ground, how she picks up her plastic shovels when we pick up our real shovels, this biomimicry she sees. I try to slow down when the bugs in the ground also pick up their shovels. I try to show her how they use their wrist, scoop down into the deep dirt, into the roots, how even us, the bugs, the trees, and the water all know this cycle, this process of uncovering toda la tierra que nos quiere cubrir, cada cosa que nos quiere cargar como un niño, otra vez en la barriga de nuestra madre. Have you ever returned to the soils that carried you like your mother? Have you ever come back to the original kitchen where you were made? This unbelievable recipe that has your name, this unimaginable taste that has your walk, this unfathomable existence and experience which has your laugh. Mira, mijo, como sonríes como si eras un cielo, como traes una risa como si fueras tormenta, como si cada cosa que saliera de tu cuerpo es un milagro hecho por Dios. Do you know what it is to go out of the ground like God made you on purpose? Like your fingers, your forearm hairs, your chin hairs, tu bigote que apenas está saliendo is all intended. Don't you know, even when they add a little bit more salt because their wrist was just a little too ligero, no suficiente fuerte, do you know what it is to accidentally mess up the recipe and end up with you? Do you know what it is to take perfection and make it just a little ugly, and then everyone says, my God, how did you end up to be the way you are? And you show them your chips, la oreja que está rompida, la sangre que sale de tu labio, la espalda que está torcida. Do you know what it is to be el árbol que lloró y todavía está aquí? Do you know what it is to be the lightning storm that laughed and brought down the rain and the hail? Estamos en el jardín otra vez con esta sobrina, this little niece of mine who laughs like she is a sunflower, with teeth like she is a semilla, with this espalda ya. You know one day she will be a tree who dances with the sun, who takes an afternoon and makes it an asada, makes it la birria que tú comes, makes it the tacos that you put chile on. This niña will be cultura. By the way we show her how to pour water onto these plants, you know she will know how to make a party out of anything. El domingo, graduations, kindergarten, out of it being just Sunday morning, and look, la música está tocando y es tiempo de limpiar. She will be that woman. Todavía escuchando Marco Antonio Solís, todavía escuchando La Panchita, and then also listening to Tupac, and also listening to La Santa Cecilia, and also listening to the wind, and also always listening to this dirt, mija. Siempre escucha la tierra. Ese músico que nunca olvidó la original instrumento de nomás ser, de salir así. Qué imaginable ser tú. Qué milagro ser tú. A llegar a este mundo como herencia, a llegar a este mundo como regalo, a llegar a este mundo que si fuera intencional tu apariencia en este momento sagrado, distinto, único. Do you know what it is to become perfect just because your mom came from immigrants? Because your father knows the entire camino de México a los Estados Unidos. Porque el desierto carried you and your mom in the third trimester, 9th month, and your name was chosen by that desert. Smile, hijita. La raíz nunca termina. Este trabajo es por siempre. Este milagro es tuyo. Thank y'all very much. Thank y'all so much for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed our speakers. Please, if you signed up for the event, take a tote bag or buttons. They're free in the back. If you registered online, you get a tote bag for free. If you didn't register online now and then get a tote bag for free. Thank you, Madison Spearing. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, sound. Thank you, video. Thank you, y'all, the unspoken heroes, making all the night work. Hope you guys have a good night. Hasta mañana.